Hello, Wellspring. We're jumping into our April 6th reading. We're going to be in 1 Kings chapter 11. I'll be reading from the NIV. But before we get into this, I just want to remind you that this whole book of Kings, 1st and 2nd Kings, we're seeing why God had desired to establish a theocracy. We're going to see the highs and lows of these kingdoms. And as the book goes, we're going to see that there's a lot less highs and more lows and more lows and more lows. There's a couple spots of revival. But time and time again, we're going to see in a similar way that King David was a man after God's own heart and pursued after God. He fell at the end of his reign. He made several mistakes and it cost his family. And, we've been reading about Solomon and this golden age of Israel. Their wealth is basically unimaginable. People show up and see it, like the Queen of Sheba shows up and sees it and is blown away by it, right? That's what we talked about yesterday. Solomon's wisdom has been off the charts. People are the world's being influenced by his teachings, by his decisions, by his wisdom. He's leading the people of Israel in a lot of good ways. Yet we are going to see that Solomon also falls prey to the desires of the flesh and gives in to some decisions that he shouldn't, and makes actually a lot of decisions that he shouldn't, and continues to make them. It's kind of going to be listed as one major decision here collectively, but we're going to see the cost of that on Solomon, on Israel, on the people of God, and quite frankly, we're going to see the cost of this sin on God's heart, and then the response that has to come. Because once again, God wanted to lead the people, but the people wouldn't have it. They wanted a king. And so now they're bearing the consequences of requesting a king. So here we go. 1 Kings chapter 11, I'm reading from the NIV. King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter, Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites. They were from nations about which the Lord had told Israel, "You must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after their gods." Nevertheless, Solomon held fast to them in love. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and wives led him astray. As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been. He followed Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Moloch, the detestable god of the Ammonites. So Solomon did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did not follow the Lord completely, as David his father had done. On a hill east of Jerusalem, Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the detestable god of Moab, and for Moloch, the detestable god of the Ammonites. He did the same for all his foreign wives, who burned incense and offered sacrifices to their gods. The Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. Although he had forbidden Solomon to follow other gods, Solomon did not keep the Lord's command. So the Lord said to Solomon, "Since this is your attitude, and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees, which I commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates. Nevertheless, for the sake of David your father, I will not do it during your lifetime. I will tear it out of the hand of your son, yet I will not tear the whole kingdom from him, but will give him one tribe, for the sake of David my servant, and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen." Then the Lord raised up against Solomon an adversary, Hadad the Edomite, from the royal line of Edom. Earlier, when David was fighting with Edom, Joab, the commander of the army, who had gone up to bury the dead, had struck down all the men in Edom. Joab and all the Israelites stayed there for 6 months until they had destroyed all the men in Edom. But Hadad, still only a boy, fled to Egypt with some Edomite officials who had served his father. They set out from Midian and went to Paran. Then, taking people from Paran with them, they went to Egypt, to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who gave Hadad a house and land and provided him with food. Pharaoh was so pleased with Hadad that he gave him a sister of his own wife, Queen Tephanes, in marriage. The sister of Tephanes bore him a son named Genubath, whom Tephanes brought up in the royal palace. Then Genubath lived with Pharaoh's own children. While he was in Egypt, Hadad heard that David rested with his ancestors and that Joab, the commander of the army, was also dead. Then Hadad said to Pharaoh, "Let me go, that I may return to my own country." "What have you lacked here that you want to go back to your own country for?" Pharaoh asked. "Nothing," Hadad replied, "but do let me go." And God raised up Solomon another adversary, Rezin son of Eliada, who had fled from his master Hadadezer, king of Zobah. When David destroyed Zobah's army, Rezin gathered a band of men around him and became their leader. They went to Damascus. There they settled and took control. Rezin was Israel's adversary as long as Solomon lived, adding to the trouble caused by Hadad. So Rezin ruled in Aram and was hostile towards Israel. Also Jeroboam son of Nebat rebelled against the king. He was one of Solomon's officials, an Ephraimite from Zeradah, and his mother was a widow named Zeruiah. Here's the account of how he rebelled against against the king. Solomon had built the terraces and had filled in the gap of the wall of the city of David his father. Now Jeroboam was a man of standing, and when Solomon saw how well the young man did his work, he put him in charge of the whole labor force for the tribes of Joseph. About that time, Jeroboam was going out of Jerusalem, and Ahijah, the prophet of Shiloh, met him on the way wearing a new cloak. The two of them were alone out in the country, and Ahijah took hold of the new cloak he was wearing and tore it into 12 pieces. Then he said to Jeroboam, "Take 10 pieces for yourself, for this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. See, I am going to tear the kingdom out of Solomon's hand and give you 10 tribes. But for the sake of my servant David and the city of Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, he will have 1 tribe. I will do this because they have forsaken me and worshipped Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh, the god of the Moabites, and Moloch, the god of the Ammonites, and have not walked in obedience to me, nor done what is right in my eyes, nor kept my decrees and laws as David, Solomon's father, did. But I will not take the whole kingdom out of Solomon's hand. I have made him ruler all the days of his life for the sake of David my servant, whom I chose and who obeyed my commands and decrees. I will take the kingdom from his son's hands and give you 10 tribes. I will give 1 tribe to his son, so that David, my servant, will always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem, the city where I chose to put my name. However, as for you, I will take you, and you will rule over all that your heart desires. You will be king over Israel. If you do whatever I command you and walk in obedience to me and do what is right in my eyes by obeying my decrees and commands, as David my servant did, I will be with you. I will build you a dynasty as enduring as the one I built for David, and will give Israel to you. I will humble David's descendants because of this, but not forever." Solomon tried to kill Jeroboam, but Jeroboam fled to Egypt, to Shishak, the king, and stayed there until Solomon's death. As for the other servants of Solomon's reign, as for the other events of Solomon's reign, all he did and the wisdom he displayed, are they not written in the book of the annals of Solomon? Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel for 40 years. Then he rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David, and Rehoboam his son succeeded him as king. Yeah, so here we have Solomon choosing not to honor the Lord, not to stay faithful to the covenant, not to stay faithful to the commandments of God. Clearly, Solomon has an issue. 700 women as wives and 300 concubines on top of that. And he's marrying women that were not inside of the scope of what was permissible for the king of Israel or what was permissible for an Israelite. And God warned them not to marry foreign women because they would end up serving false gods. And here we have Solomon building high places to sacrifice, giving sacrifices, and being swayed to believe in Molech and Chemosh and these foreign gods. And unfortunately, not just to these foreign gods, but these are the foreign gods that are celebrated and worshipped, many of them by child sacrifice. And, it doesn't say that Solomon partook particularly in child sacrifice. I don't know for sure that he would have crossed that line, but nonetheless, he was allowing worship to go up to like Molech, who was a nasty deity, and there was some terrible stuff in that space. But it's happening because he's being led astray by all of these women that he's put in his life because he's not controlling himself, or he's trying to take political advantage of all these marriages. Whatever the case, maybe a mixture of both. It has been disobedient to God's word, and we see that it's not beneficial to him or the kingdom of Israel. And God says, I'm going to raise up people against you. And he allows people from the outside and from the inside. So there's those like the Edomite Hadad and Rezin, who fled from Solomon, but now they've come back and they're kind of through like guerrilla warfare tactics, attacking him here and attacking him here and attacking him here. And perhaps it's not a straight outright fight, but it's weakening Solomon's defenses, and it's keeping Solomon constantly thinking, which way do I have to look? Which way do I have to look? And making it difficult to trade. And all of those things are happening. And then from within his own country, Jeroboam, who was once a person that Solomon recognized as a man of character, a man of good work, a man of integrity. Solomon put him in charge, right, of the tribe of, I think it said Joseph there. Put him in charge of the workers from that tribe. And now God calls out a prophet who says, Jeroboam, God is going to raise you up to be the replacement, to step into a space to lead the kingdom. But we also begin to hear of a potential division. We get this word that 10 of the tribes are going to go to Jeroboam, and one tribe is going to go to the son of Solomon. And we're already starting to get the hints that we're about to have this great divide that's going to come as a result of Solomon's sin. He doesn't follow after God the way David did. And even in David's sin, I think it's interesting that we hear David was a man after God's heart, and Solomon changed. David's sins, sometimes he gratifies the flesh. Sometimes he makes quick, impulsive decisions. Sometimes he's violent. But he continues to worship God and God alone. And Solomon breaks down in that space, and his heart gets bent and gets moved towards these foreign gods. And so God's going to take the kingdom from Solomon's family and from their line, and yet because of David, God is going to spare at least a little piece of the kingdom for David's line. Tough stuff to wrestle with, but this is the journey we're in. We're in the book of Kings, and we're seeing why we don't put our trust and faith in humans, even tremendous leaders like Solomon, who issue in golden ages. Our faith and trust and hope have to be placed in God and God alone. God bless you, Wellspring. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Press into him and allow him to lead and guide you. Have a great day.